The Draconid Military Academy had stood for 3,000 years, its obsidian spires piercing the crimson sky of Drakmar Prime. In all that time, never had its hallowed training grounds witnessed such chaos. Commander Kalik, a bronze-scaled veteran whose wings bore scars from a dozen campaigns, stood frozen in disbelief. His carefully arranged formation of 20 dragon cubs, each the size of a terrestrial horse, had just disintegrated. The younglings, who moments ago had been practicing aerial maneuvers with military precision, were now tumbling over each other in a frenzied stampede toward the human standing at the edge of the training field. Sarah Wynne hadn't expected this reaction. The young xenobiologist had arrived on Drakmar Prime as part of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, assigned to observe Draconid military traditions. She'd been assured her presence would go largely unnoticed. Dragons, after all, were apex predators, proud, ancient, and utterly indifferent to lesser species. The first cub reached her, a small silver female with oversized wings she hadn't quite grown into. The dragonling made a sound somewhere between a chirp and a roar, then promptly flopped onto her back at Sarah's feet, exposing her belly scales in a gesture of complete submission and trust. "By the eternal flame," Kalik breathed, his translator pendant rendering his shock into perfect English. "That's impossible." Sarah stood very still as more cubs surrounded her, their scales shimmering in shades of copper, emerald, and deep purple. They pressed against her legs, wrapped their tails around her arms, and made soft trilling sounds she'd never heard described in any xenological database. One particularly bold cub, barely a meter long, climbed up her back and perched on her shoulder, nuzzling against her neck. "Commander?" Sarah called out, trying to keep her voice steady, despite having approximately half a ton of baby dragon piled around her. "Is this normal?" Kalik's wings flared as he strode across the training ground, his expression cycling between bewilderment and something that might have been concern. Behind him, several other instructors had emerged from the academy, drawn by the commotion. They stopped dead in their tracks at the sight before them. "Normal?" Kalik's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Human dragon cubs are born with instincts honed over millions of years of evolution. They fear nothing because they are meant to become the most dangerous creatures in known space. They do not cuddle." Yet cuddle they did. Sarah carefully lowered herself to sit cross-legged on the ground, and the cubs adjusted themselves around her like she was their own mother. The silver female had rolled back over and was now grooming Sarah's hand with a surprisingly gentle tongue, despite teeth that could punch through steel plating. "What's her name?" Sarah asked, scratching behind the dragonling's eye ridges. The cub's eyes brilliant gold with slit pupils half closed in contentment. "Zinthara," Kalik said quietly, approaching with cautious steps. "She's from the Flamebrand clutch. Most aggressive bloodline in recent memory. Last week she bit through a training instructor's armor." He paused, studying the scene with an analytical eye that belied his warrior appearance. "She's never let anyone touch her." "None of them have." Sarah looked up at the towering dragon commander, then at the circle of instructors watching from a distance. Understanding began to dawn. "You raise them without physical affection, don't you? They're trained from hatching to be soldiers, warriors. It is our way," Kalik said, but something in his tone suggested uncertainty. "Softness breeds weakness," or Sarah said carefully, running her hand along Zinthara's neck, feeling the warm scales and the rapid heartbeat beneath. "Maybe you're raising traumatized children who don't know how to process the need for comfort because you've told them that need doesn't exist." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Kalik's tail lashed once, a sign of agitation, but he didn't argue. Instead, he watched as another cub, a burly male with dark crimson scales, crawled into Sarah's lap despite being nearly too large to fit. The dragonling made a sound that was unmistakably a purr. "On Earth," Sarah continued, "we learned something important about raising soldiers. The strongest warriors aren't the ones who never learn to feel. They're the ones who feel everything and fight anyway. Who understand what they're protecting because they've known love, comfort, safety." She met Kalik's ancient eyes. "Your cubs aren't weak, Commander. They're starving." For a long moment, Kalik said nothing. The wind whistled through the training ground, carrying the scent of sulfur from the volcanic plains beyond. Then slowly the old dragon lowered himself to the ground. His movement was awkward, unpracticed. Zinthara's head popped up, regarding her commander with curious eyes. "Show me," Kalik said simply. Sarah guided his clawed hand, so much larger than hers, capable of crushing stone, to rest gently on Zinthara's head. The cub went rigid for a heartbeat, then melted into the touch, her whole body relaxing in a way Sarah suspected it never had before. Like this, Sarah said softly. Just ... connection. Presence. Let them know they're safe. One by one, the other instructors approached. Dragons who had spent centuries perfecting the art of war now lowered themselves to the ground to learn something entirely different. The cubs responded immediately, distributing themselves among their teachers, finally receiving what their instincts had been crying out for all along. As the twin suns of Drakmar Prime began to set, casting long shadows across the training field, Sarah Wynne sat surrounded by dragons and realized that humanity's greatest export might not be technology or military strategy. It might simply be the understanding that strength and gentleness were never meant to be enemies. Kalek caught her eye across the pile of contented dragonlings. His expression was unreadable, but when he spoke, his voice carried something new, perhaps gratitude, perhaps hope. We have much to learn from humans, he said. Sarah smiled, scratching Zinthra behind the horns one more time. And we from you, Commander. And we from you.